Welcome to Gut Punch, the podcast that explores life-changing moments. Hosted by Kathryn Lancioni, a seasoned educator with personal insights into resilience. Kathryn shares how life can change in an instant, shaping our path forward. Each episode features inspiring guests who face their own gut punch moments. Guests share their journeys through loss, upheaval, and triumph. What to expect: honest conversations, lessons in resilience, inspiration for growth. Join Kathryn as she highlights courage and perseverance in every story. Gut Punch is a reminder that there is always a path forward. Be part of the conversation. Register now to join Kathryn for today's journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gut Punch. My name is Kathryn Lancioni, and I'm your host for today's show. Today, we are joined by Margaret Graziano, a fellow Italian, and a woman who has an absolutely amazing story. So, Margaret, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, same here. Absolute pleasure. So before we get into the details of kind of what happened, I'd love it if you could share with everyone a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I started my career way back when. No, for 25 years, I was in the recruiting industry. And over those 25 years, I went from being an individual contributor to a director. And then I started my own firm when I was 27. The time frame from start to finish, we did the math. And my company and I placed over 10,000 people in full-time and contractor roles, about 2,000 full-time and the rest contractor. But one thing I learned and I've mastered is people at work, why they take jobs, why they excel in jobs, why they fail in jobs, why they leave, and why in some cases they get fired, and in other cases they get promoted. And so about 15 years ago, I sold my interest in the recruiting company. I clawed out my intellectual property for what would turn into the Gut Punch. And then I started Keen Alignment, which focuses on really optimizing the collective genius in the enterprise, focuses on creating the kind of environment where people can thrive and operate in synergy with each other. And so that's kind of my bio in 3 minutes or less.
That's great. All right. So let's get right to it since you already alluded to it. So all this great experience placing over 10,000 people, which is extraordinary, by the way. Then I know in my own career, like the recruiter was always absolutely so critical in helping me get into those opportunities that I didn't even know existed, frankly. So amazing career. So what was the gut punch? What happened?
So I had this vision so I went to a 3-day large group self-awareness training, which I now lead those myself. But I had a consultant come in. I was frustrated at the recruiting company and I had like 25 employees and we were flat in our money, which is the exact place I go now and in my consulting where people are flat and they need to accelerate. And he was there for 2 days and he challenged me in ways I had never been challenged before. And he invited me to do this large group self-awareness. And I did that. And in the large group self-awareness, I saw myself living in Northern California. I saw myself working with CEOs on falling in love with their company again and bringing the CEO and everyone else at that organization into alignment. So I had this vision, which I now call my North Star. I wear my compass. I got the compass on the wall. And then I went to a Jack Canfield workshop and it's all about manifesting your future. And so I put it into a game plan. The only problem is I made up that in order to do the work I really wanted to do, I had to have millions of dollars in the bank because the work I wanted to do didn't pay. And I was wrong, but I didn't know I was wrong. So I sold my last son was going away to school. I said, why am I paying all this money for this McMansion? I sold everything I had, the house, the cars, the business. And I moved to California in a U-Haul truck, maybe 8x10, with just the few things I felt were important to me. And I went on a search in Silicon Valley for someone to take my intellectual property, this conscious hiring that really was a unique value proposition in my recruiting. It's how I got to be in the 1% of that field. I had this methodical process, which we won't talk about right now, that worked. And so I went on a search in Silicon Valley. And what I didn't know at the time is somewhere between Wyoming and Utah,
Yeah.
I became incredibly scared. Like I was, woo, I'm going to do it. I'm going. But I didn't know. And I didn't even know I didn't know it. I had dropped down below the power and freedom line into scarcity and fear.
Wow.
And so as I'm interviewing the 3 doors, door 1 were people I already knew and already worked with, but they'd never built anything like this. Door number 2 was a company that I was walking down the street one day and I see the doorway and it said, we turn your HR process into apps available at your fingertips. And I said, oh my God, how amazing. This is what I have. And then door number 3 was a kid, a rookie who wanted to partner with someone like me and make a software. So door number 2 seemed like the obvious choice. When I opened the door, on the wall, I saw a floor to ceiling mock-up of what I had in my image, in my head, of what I needed to build. And so I started talking to them and I said, it's a workflow process. And before I knew it, I was literally in bed with them. I mean, not literally, but we were.
Yeah, you were partnered up.
We were building this thing. We had no contracts in place. And I started bringing in board members and I started bringing in family and I started bringing in people that used to work for me at Alliance HR Network. And I brought in customer advisories and everybody thought we're building a workflow. Well, the CEO, because he was 59 and I was, whatever the difference is, 48 or whatever, he had about 10% more ownership, now gets on this thing that he's going to compete with LinkedIn. And this was 15 years ago. In everything I knew, there is no way we're going to compete with LinkedIn. And he wanted to disintermediate the human out of human resources. That's never been my intention. My whole career, I have been successful because I partner with HR people and I do the work that maybe they don't have the time or the interest in doing or the competency, frankly. And so I started saying, I don't think this is right. And then my apprentice she came in as a real partner, like 10% of my business, but started 7 years before as my apprentice. She started challenging him on pay because I was working for free because I was an owner. And that's what you do in Silicon Valley. And she started challenging him on some of the ethics that he was running. And one day my phone starts blowing up 96 missed calls from a phone number I've never seen before. And finally at like 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, what the hell?
Yes.
And it was her. He cut her off. He turned off her email. He shut down her cell phone and he outed her. She was fired. And I brought her in and I was almost 50% partner in this company and knew nothing about it. So the next day I go in and I say, what is going on? And he said, if you don't like it, there's the door. He said, we have your intellectual property. We have your son. And we have all the secret sauce of how this works. We don't need you anymore. Yeah. And I had spent a year of my life working for free, giving everything, bringing in all these people. And so not only was it a gut punch, it was an 80-pound anvil on my body.
Yeah, it was. Wow.
So the next day I get up and I'm ready to go confront him. And I go to the door and I go to that same door that I opened that I saw I go to the door to open it and my hand is so shaky, I couldn't even open the door. And you could tell by me and meeting me, I'm not a person who operates in fear, at least on the outside, but this was visibly, I could not open the door. I went back in my car, I went home, I crawled in bed, pulled the covers over my head and just laid there.
And that's
4 hours.
so not you. At least that's not the part of you that I know. Like, that's
Right.
crazy.
4 hours later, my son, who works for the company, comes home for lunch, walks into my bedroom and says, Mom, what are you doing? And I said, I failed and I made a mistake and I'm whining. And he goes, the woman who raised me would never lay in bed and act like a victim. Get up and do something about it. This is my 20-year-old son.
Good, but good for him that he had the wherewithal, the knowledge, and the guts to come in and say that to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did what all evolved people would do. I called Kaiser and said, I need an emergency psychological appointment. I don't know who I am anymore. They got me in that afternoon. It was about 5 o'clock. And I meet with the guy for an hour and he said, honey, you don't need Prozac. You don't need shock treatment. You need an attorney. And called my best friend, told her everything. She said, my brother works in tech in Silicon Valley. I know they just had something happen. Within 24 hours, I was meeting with my IP attorney, who's amazing. And it took 18 months to get the intellectual property back, but we got it back. Now,
Congratulations.
had anything that was built.
Right.
I did get a wage claim for $100,000, but I had spent $1 million of my time
Yes.
on this. But I was just so happy to get the intellectual property back. And now we use it in our business. We don't have a software yet, but we use it in our business to help companies that care about culture, make sure they're bringing the right people in for the right reasons, who really want to be there. And so that's my gut punch. And there's more to it.
Okay. Go ahead. Do
So
continue, please.
please do tell.
Yeah.
So, I can't work. I'm on a non-compete.
Right.
And I'm home for a holiday. And my cousin says, I'm telling everybody about it because it was a big deal that I left. I'm Italian. We don't leave home. We stay in our clan. And I'm at 48 years old. I leave and I go to California.
And
So
I have to
everybody,
ask, where did you come from? New York, Jersey? Where were you?
Chicago.
Chicago.
So funny in New York. Everyone thinks that. Anyway, I hope that's not a bad thing.
No, being a New Yorker, it's a good thing. It's a compliment.
Thank you. So my cousin says, well, why don't you go collect unemployment? And I was like, for 25 years, I was a hell no to unemployment because I was finding people jobs. And if you're on unemployment, you can't work. So a lot of people, or you can't work full time. A lot of people would turn down opportunities to be working to collect unemployment. So I had an aversion to unemployment.
Understandable. Yeah.
So I walk into the San Jose unemployment office. There's 65 people in line. So it's 2014 and I'm at the end of the line and it hit me like a bolt of lightning, humility that I never had ever before.
Wow.
What must it feel like to stand in line and have to collect a check that's a fraction of what you make? I think I got $200.
Yeah.
I collected for 6 weeks and then I landed the biggest client I've ever landed, the biggest contract I've ever landed. It was $1 million. But that feeling of standing in line and being ashamed and feeling like a loser, but that all left. And what was there is compassion and love for humanity. And so it's the best thing that ever happened to me. On top of that, I met with my coach, who I had been working with for about 3 years. Called her and I said, so here's what happened. And she said, now are you willing to understand that success and life are nonlinear? That you've got to stop thinking in order to do this, I have to do that. That if you just get your head in the right place, you can create anything. So I wrote an article because we brainstormed and I wrote an article on why people leave jobs.
Yeah. Okay.
That article got picked up in a national publication. Somebody saw that article, walked into the CEO's office and said, this woman knows exactly what is going on with us. I got an email. Everything you talk about in your article, I've done wrong. I'm a new CEO, which is now really what I specialize in. I've worked with over 50 brand new CEOs in aligning culture to their vision for the enterprise. I flew myself out there. He said, if you can come out here, we'll know in a day if we're going to work with you.
Wow.
Came out there. He had 30 people in the room. As I'm out there, one guy raises his hand. He goes, Maji, did anybody tell you we had a gunfight at our last union negotiation? And that was my first client.
Wow. Amazing.
So, yeah. But it has turned into my whole life. Who knows what
that experience.
who knows what I'd be doing. I wouldn't have went into culture as full throttle as I have.
Yeah.
I probably would have just done like mind, body, and spirit retreats for CEOs.
You would have been like an executive life coach. Yeah.
Yeah. I knew the company. We started Keen Alignment while we were at the software company because there was some inklings that something might go wrong and I needed a backdoor. I also needed to make money and people were calling. And I said, I can't help you with anything with recruiting or hiring, but I can help you with what I know about people in the workplace. And so I started Keen Alignment. But the funniest thing in the world is as this all broke apart, my partner, the junior partner, not the guy that I was not going to work with anymore, she said, isn't it interesting that you, for a living, have helped people hire for culture and you made a business deal with the devil because you didn't? And I said, we were out of alignment. And that was what birthed Keen Alignment, that whole thing.
So I want to go back to something you talked about, which was that moment where you go and you're trying to open the door and your hand is shaking and you retreat and go home and pull the covers over the head. Even though you had this motivational talk from your son, what was it? Do you remember what was it that got you to get out of bed and call that attorney and move forward?
I may have done it on my own in a few days.
Okay.
or weeks, but I was stuck like I've never been stuck before, and I was consumed with fear. My son James, when he was 9 years old, he did the Landmark Forum. He did it again when I moved to California.
Okay.
I raised him to be a self-sustaining,
Human.
introspective go-getter. And these kids, when they like me, because sometimes kids don't like their parents, when they like me, they feed me compliments like, "You're the most amazing woman. You're so, you're driven, and you've taught us so much, and you've provided so much." His saying to me, "The woman who raised me would never take this lying down and wouldn't be a victim." Like, he literally called me a victim, and
Yeah.
I was being a victim.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was it. And then, the shrink, I thought I needed something. I thought I needed shock treatment or a big dose of Prozac so that I could not be fearful anymore, so that I could
Right.
not be sad anymore, so that I could not be beating myself up about such a stupid mistake. But when he said, "You don't need any of this, you need to take action," that's two people within 24 hours telling me to take action, which is no accident that today I teach the sculpt process for response agility. Something bad is happening in your outside world, stopping. Now, my case, I climbed in bed, but then even at the shrink's office, I stopped. I connected. Who am I really? Understood what was going on. All of my limiting beliefs came crashing down on me. I'm unworthy. This was never going to work out. I don't have
Self-doubt. Yeah.
I don't have a master's degree, all this stuff. I made bad decisions. I was in a hurry. And then tuning in and listening to what I need to do now, and then processing that, and then taking action. That it took about 2 full days, so 48 hours, but now I teach people to do it in 90 seconds. But they gotta be coaching with me in order to learn to do that in 90 seconds.
Of course.
And not everybody has somebody who's gonna pull them out of the trenches like James did for me. I will always, and I talk to him about it all the time, and I tell the story, and he knows. That was the parent the child, parenting the parent, which I know we don't wanna do that every day in life because that's not the right thing. But sometimes you need somebody who's got your back, and sometimes somebody to pull you out of when you're in a state of hopelessness, despair, it's the lowest level on the 7 levels of effectiveness. You often cannot get out on your own.
Was it hard for you to hear your son say what he said?
No. No, I've been training my brain and my body to take feedback since I've been 36 years old. And here's the thing. Remember, before that, I was a straight commission recruiter for 15 years. Talk about getting hit in the head with a hammer and not, ouch. It's constant rejection. You're candidate, and they tell you why. If you make it in that business, you're good with feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, I just went to a 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀𝗲 week-long, which I highly recommend for anybody listening to this. Wow, wow, wow. Everything I teach, this guy does on steroids. Anyway, and in that, I was with my friend, and my friend said, "Wow, you've gained a lot of weight in the last 6 months," because I hadn't seen her in 6 months. And I wanted to be pissed at her, like, "Screw you, I have not gained a lot of weight." But the truth is, I was in a bike accident, and I was nursing myself, and kind of what probably most of us do when we're nursing ourselves. "Oh, I'm going to have some comfort food." And I've been comfort fooding it for 6 months and not doing heavy cardio. And she said, "Are you mad at me for saying that?" And I said, "Actually, you're the only one in my life who has."
Yeah.
But I see it when I look in the mirror, and I like, "Oh, well, it'll take me a year because I'm trying to nurture my body." But the reality is I went running during that meditation retreat twice, and I was really good at running. My body is okay. I don't need
Yeah.
to nurture my body anymore. It's like, come on, sister, get off stuff happens to us, and we get stuck. And the beauty of living in the world of personal development and transformation is if you're surrounded with people that know who you really are, you'll never be stuck too long. And that goes to, like, we're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. At that point, my son was living with me, he was working with me, and he knows me.
Yeah.
And he didn't let me wallow in the agony of failure at all.
Well, and I think there's so much in what you just said, right? I think, one thing I always say, this is kind of similar to what you just said, is we're our are our own best friend, but are also our worst enemy, right?
Yeah.
We're the
Yeah.
ones that can come up with all the reasons why we shouldn't do something. And sometimes, as you know, it can be pretty toxic. And sometimes you need that partner, that son, that daughter, that friend to say, what are you doing? Like, this is not you. You're better than this.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yes.
you are. But sometimes it's like, no, and we're great at coming up for all the reasons that we can't do something, right? What about the can?
Yeah.
And what I love about your story is your son kicked you in the butt and you needed that, or else you might still be in that bed with the covers over your head and eating a lot of mac and cheese and other comfort food, right?
You
But
know
you're
what?
not.
I'll say I wouldn't still be in there, but there are times in my life that something comes out of my mouth that is incongruent with who I am, and
Yeah.
I catch it.
Yeah.
I catch it. That's victim speak. What do you know how sometimes we say things to ourselves, like you're roaming through the house and you're packing and getting ready for a trip, and I'll forget something and I'll go, oh, you idiot. Why am I saying that to myself? Or stupid, or, oh, you might be losing maybe this is early dementia. Why would I even talk to myself like that? But I'm not taking it seriously, but it is coming out of my mouth. And
Situation. Yeah, I had a situation yesterday where it was just me being woeful about what happened to me, and I had this moment where I had something like, "Why me?" kind of comment, and I was like, we are immensely. I was like, we are not going there." I was in an event a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to a woman, and I talk about this all the time. I lost the top of my right thumb from what I went through, so I have this prosthetic, which I wear sometimes, and other times, most times I don't because it's annoying. But anyway, point of the story was I was at this event in the city, and it was actually a National Speakers Association meeting, and there was a woman there who didn't have the lower part of her arm, and I didn't notice at first because she had her arm pulled into her jacket. So I was telling her about my lack of right thumb tip, and she goes, "Look at me," and I looked down, and I was like, "Oh," and she said. And your reaction? She goes, "You know what I said?" She goes, "Do you think any different in me because I'm missing half of my arm?" I said, "No." And she said, "When I get into my moments of being sad or woeful, I say so and I move on." And she said, "Anytime that you feel sad about the fact that you lost your top of your right thumb, say so." And that's what I said to myself yesterday. I was like, and so what can't we do? And like, really, there's nothing we can't do. It might be a little bit harder, but we can't do it. And so to your point, it's like you need to look internally and pull yourself out of that hole before you get too deep. But I think
it's
some people are,
discipline. It takes discipline, Catherine.
it does. It does. And I think some
It's
people are afraid to self-regulate and afraid to pull themselves out.
Well, I don't know about that. I
Okay.
think I think it might be that they don't think they're capable of it,
Very fair point.
or that they don't know it's possible, or they don't believe it's possible. Because in this day and age that we're living in, there is so much evidence, neuroscience evidence from real doctors and clinical people and researchers that the brain is programmable. And
Yes.
whether you want to lose weight, whether you want to make more money, whether you want to have a better job, whether you want to find your love of your life, everything we're creating in our life is self-induced. Everything. Even if we were born into poverty, there's enough stories of people who've gotten out of poverty. It's a mindset. And if you take on if it's to be, it's up to me. If you take on that mindset, regardless of what it is, and then you surround yourself with people who are willing to take on their mindset, you can change your reality. You can change your reality because you shift your own personality based on what you want. But we're all born into the drift.
Yes.
We're not born into the drift. We're born into this magical experiences that then becomes the drift, as Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in Domestication. And we become at a very young age, 3 years old, 2 years old, who we think our parents want us to be, or
That's
who our
right.
teacher wants us to be, or who our siblings need us to be. And we forget that we are creations of something much bigger than ourselves, and we can create anything. There's thousands of documented stories of people who've changed their reality. And I'm one of them. I mean, we don't have time because I know we're coming to a close, but I didn't have like this amazing upbringing that I was encouraged that I could be or do anything I wanted. I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional household that was filled with addiction and violence. And so what I did learn as a young person is to be resilient. And at a very young age, I said, I will not repeat what my mother's repeated. I will not repeat this. So I think people are not afraid to self-regulate I'm not sorry to disagree, but we're having a conversation. I think they don't think they can do it.
Yeah. So this leads to my question that just has been in my mind for the past couple of minutes we've been talking is you talked about resilience. And I know going through what I went through, I discovered this resilience that I didn't know I had. And I know it's discovery. If people are listening and they're stuck and they're afraid to discover that resilience, what are your tips?
Yeah. So first and foremost, tap into yourself, your big S, and ask yourself the questions. Why am I here? What is my life for? When I say purpose, I don't mean like a job purpose. I mean like your calling. Like, when people live life as a consumer, it's easy to go into depression.
Yeah.
Because you're consuming things. When you live life as a contribution, you're of service. It's easy to experience joy and bliss and fulfillment. So what is your purpose? What is your calling? Why are you here? How do you contribute? And if you can figure out that North Star, everything else will be easy. Everything else will be easy. Not easy street, but it will be easy to come back home when you go into reactionary mode, when your sympathetic nervous system has taken over and hijacked you. You can get back into homeostasis by grounding yourself and connecting to your highest self. Real quick, there's 7 levels of individual, group, and organizational effectiveness. The bottom 3 levels, frustration, fear, and hopelessness, exist in the bottom part of your body, from your solar plexus down to your root chakra. We have energy centers. Those energy centers are about survival. When we are feeling threatened, that survival comes way up and constricts us, and it even constricts our ability to think. But the upper energy centers is where courage lives in the heart, and then engagement where you're participating fully in the throat, and then innovation in your third eye, bridge of your nose area, and then synchronicity, your connection to all. That's expansive energy. That's where serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins come from. So if you can connect, you can see more, you open your aperture. Whereas when you're stuck and you're constrained and you're just trying to survive that they took your software and they told you to leave, and you're in protection mode and you can't see a positive future. You can't see it. And if you're the kind of person who surrounds yourself with people who love you, but they agree with you about how small you are and how you should be pissed off and you should be depressed, try to only have one of those kind of friends, because you can all be on medication together, and we live in some of the most challenging times in history, not just because there's political unrest and social unrest and climate unrest, because we live in a world where all of this is barraging us to the tune of 140,000 pieces or 120,000 pieces of information coming at us a day, with about 85% of it being negative. So someone's got to have your back, as I said. You've got to have your own back. No one's coming.
That's right.
You are your knight in shining armor.
That's right. Well, I feel too that to your point, if you can get out of your own box and to think about what your purpose is, what's your why are you here, what can you contribute, that it makes those moments of sadness, it makes those moments of fear relative. And I think it helps them go away faster, because if you step back and think about what your purpose is, and if you don't know your purpose, having this freedom to discover it, right, which is amazing, that you have that goal, or you have that goal to fulfill. And then I think there's so much more meaning that one can get.
Yeah, I have a real recent example. So
Sure.
during COVID, my business had lost about $780,000 worth of business, signed contracts in 4 days.
Wow.
So it was early COVID. Everybody was scared. Everybody was canceling everything. And I live alone. I'm a sole supporter and I do have savings, but
Yes.
I didn't really want to dip into that. So I called my coach. This guy's Ken Manning, and he wrote the book Invisible Power. And I'm lucky enough to have spent 2 weeks with him and his partner, Obi-Wan. So Yoda and Obi-Wan. But they're the authors of Insight Principles, Ken Manning and Robert Sharbat. And so I called Ken and I said, I feel like the earth is moving below my feet. I feel like it's constant disruption and, yeah. And he knows me. I've spent time with him. He's mentored me. And he said something to the order of, I know you're a spiritual person. Let's just stop and get grounded. And then when we breathe together, and we tuned in and what's your purpose? And I told him, and he said, why not find a way to bring your purpose, which is people are liberated, people right now in a time where people are feeling so much fear. So what I did is I took my response agility training and I called everyone I've ever spoken for, all the associations, all the organizations. And I said, I will do this for free so I can help your people recalibrate, reconnect,
Yep.
and repurpose in these times. And I think I did 20 of them. And all of a sudden business started coming in.
Wow.
And I made it through that 6 months by giving,
Yes.
like, which we hear in the 12 steps. I was going to say the 7 steps, the 12 steps we hear in almost anything. If you want to get out of the hole you're in, go give.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's a wonderful way to end this conversation. And Margaret, thank you so much. I mean, I learned so much. I can only imagine what our listeners have learned. And I'm just so happy that we met on my one-day trip to Portugal a few months ago.
Yeah, I look forward to doing more together too.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So before we hop off, if you could just share with everyone how to get in touch with you, where they can find you.
Great. MargaretGraziano.com. And on that site, you can learn about my book, Ignite Culture, my next book, Align Culture, and the coaching that I do and the public speaking. And thank you, Kathryn, for having me.
My absolute pleasure. And thank all of you for listening to another episode of Gut Punch. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
That's it for today's episode of Gut Punch. I hope you found inspiration, because no matter how hard life hits, there's always a way forward. Make sure to follow or subscribe to Gut Punch on your favorite podcast platform. If you know someone who could use a little inspiration, share this episode with them. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay strong. See you in the next episode.